Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today, we are joined with Mariah Healey of ReptiFiles, and we are going to be debunking reptile myths. Hey, Mariah.
Hey, Tyler. Really excited to get going on this.
Me too. So, I was just actually listening to your podcast from the Animals at Home Network. If anybody has a moment to just take some time out of their day to listen to that, please go and do that. Mariah is brilliant. She's been in the field for quite a long time at this point, running ReptiFiles, gathering research and information to provide that to the reptile community. So it's a pleasure to have Mariah on. Mariah, I'm going to let you just kind of introduce yourself, get a little background information, and we'll jump right into it.
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Mariah Healey. I run reptifiles.com. Not to be necessarily confused with ReptiFiles, the social media, which is much smaller, and just kind of where I occasionally post videos and photos and whatever's on my mind. But reptifiles.com is where it's at. That's where it all began. That is the hub of my research activity. And it is an online database of reptile husbandry information. So right now it boasts 19 care manuals and over 80 care sheets. So on a variety of different species. Sometimes it's different species within the same genus that have subtle differences between them, but most of them are very different species, not just all. Here's the Phelsima group and here's the Taliqua group. So we've got a pretty even smattering across the more popular species, mostly concentrated in lizards and geckos, and then some in snakes, and then a few in colonia. They're less popular in the hobby for good reason, and so there's not as many care sheets there yet. But yeah, so that's that. What sets ReptiFiles apart and what has built me my reputation is my commitment to science-based reptile husbandry. So this is zoo science, natural history-based exotic animal husbandry, with an emphasis on we're taking a close look at reptiles. This isn't folklore-based husbandry. This isn't, what people are, a compilation of what people are saying in the forums and the Facebook groups. This is looking at the animal's natural history, its physiology, its, and yes, what people are saying. So experienced keepers, breeders, we're taking all of that into account, as well as, most importantly, what are the welfare standards for keeping exotics in captivity. And you put that all together and you start to see a picture of what ideal care for reptiles as pets or in zoological institutions starts to look like. And so that's my bread and butter. And one of the fun things about being a generalist rather than somebody who just really focuses in on one species or group of species, which, don't get me wrong, are really important to our hobby. Everybody, like, we need people to hyper focus on certain species. But I say thank you from the people who hyper focus, and I rely on them heavily. And thank them profusely for their contributions so that I can take their knowledge and compile it into something that will benefit everybody. And being a generalist, that means that I get kind of a bird's eye view on reptiles as a whole. A lot of the weakness of being a specialist is that you only know your group of reptiles, which is great as long as you stay in your lane. There's probably a better way to put that.
Okay.
There are some people who say, based on my experience with blue-tongued skinks, this is how snakes should be kept. And it's like, wait, back up. So when you have a bird's eye view, you get to see how they're different and also how they're similar. And so when there's a gap in the information, because, we don't have a lot of research on certain species. Some of them science loves, even when they're not very popular in the hobby, like the sandfish skink, because they're interesting. The military has researched these things because of their unique sand swimming properties. So you have the funding for that research, and then I get to be like, oh, great, I have a closer look at their physiology and we can extrapolate based on there. But other times, you're looking up information on, oh gosh, anything, Sudan plated lizards, or let's see,
Panther
a million
chameleons.
things. Yeah, chameleons, and you're like, there's nothing. There's very little published. We don't have honestly, we don't have a lot of field data for. We didn't have much on bearded dragons or ball pythons until recently, and there's actually not much on leopard geckos. Interestingly, which is a strange irony. Oh, the one I was going to bring up is viper geckos, almost non-existent in the literature. They may as well not exist. It's so frustrating. So you have to take what you know and say, based on the properties of this animal, what we do know, let's take a look at the other species that are better documented and see what we can extrapolate, what would make sense to pull. So what do we know about, that region? What do we know about the physiology, the way it's built? Is it, is it a crevice dweller? Is it all these things? And so you can start to make better leaps of logic than if you were a specialist, because you have a better idea of how reptiles in general, where the patterns lie. And so there's a lot of pattern recognition in what I do, which is fun.
Yeah, I'm really glad you actually touch on the process, because I was just talking with Fatty of Daffy's Reptiles about this. And he was like talking about, I feel like you are like on a different level than I am right now. I'm like in the beginning stages, and I look at it as like you're an expert student, like as a role model in the community, and like how you process information, how you synthesize information, how you research information, and all of that is really important to be able to identify really a holistic picture of the reptile that you're researching. And so I think for you, like going back into some of the podcasts that you were a part of, you've been doing this like prior to 2019. So really quickly, would you just be able to tell people how long you have been researching and like gathering information to get to the point where you're at now? Because I think that's important.
According to my records, the Bearded Dragon Care Manual was first created in 2015. So yeah, I've been doing this for 11 years now. And that's not counting the reptiles that I kept casually prior to that point. So yeah, it's been a while, and even though I didn't start ReptiFiles until then, and it was just a casual blog back then. I was not intending to create a database at that time. I was just like, oh, this is fun. I like to research. I'll put my findings and what I have distilled from all of the sources that I've looked at, in the hopes that maybe somebody who doesn't care to do that much reading or is simply confused, maybe they can benefit from it. And as I repeated that a few times, it really started to just feel good, and I chased that. But I've loved reptile or animal husbandry period my entire life. I mean, you can ask my parents. I have been reading about the care of animals as a special interest since I was very small. It's kind of a niche interest, but it's something that's always fascinated me, whether mostly with fish, reptiles, and horses. Those were my big interests. Not so much into. I never had a bird phase. I never really had much of a rodent, much of mammals aside from horses, really, actually. And the interesting thing about having a hyperfixation on horses for so long, being the horse girl, is when you're learning about horses, husbandry is actually really big, and that community can get pretty pretentious. Especially in like the more English discipline, looking at European standards. And so that kind of trained me into there's a higher form of husbandry and there's a lower form of husbandry. Whereas with fish, it's just kind of, this is how you do it. It's uniform. But I got to see a range with horses and kind of, see how people were doing it, when I was going volunteering at the barn every weekend, versus what does the ideal look like, and starting to just put that together. I joined the hippology team in the local 4-H, so competing horse trivia essentially, because I am that nerd.
get quite involved.
Yes. Um, and I even, like, as a kid, I had a beta fish phase and I was trying to get them to breed like most kids do, you know. It's like one thing to get a guppy to breed, like anybody can sneeze and make that happen. But
Yep.
with betas, you know, I was really, I had my phase and I was really fascinated. So I tried to share what I had learned from the internet and from whatever books I could get at the library. And, you
Yep.
know, this was back in early thousands internet. You know, this is a very different internet. Um, but I was like, I don't know how much paper and ink I wasted just printing these websites off. And like going through with my yellow highlighter and dog earring and marking and making notes in the margins. I was really going crazy. And I made a little club as a kid, the Beta Fish Breeding Club. I think there was exactly
Amazing.
one meeting, and it was just kind of an excuse to get my friends over at my house and lecture them for a little while. And they're all just like, okay, when is this going to be over?
When are we going to actually look at beta fish here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope our audience, as they're listening to this, is as inspired to critically think and gather research as you are. A big part of why I bring up the process is just because as I was gathering information and from my perspective and experience, as you're researching some of these myths and coming across, it could be science-backed articles, could be scientific papers. There are nuances and biases in that research that's conducted. So, like, even before coming on here, full disclosure, like one of the questions that we're going to go over, I provided my Mariah the notes that I took, and she was like, "Well, that study actually has a little bit of bias, and here's why, and this is why you might want to not make those points." And so, like, as you conduct your research, just make sure that you're not sitting in a silo and that you're communicating with other people in the hobby. And so, are there any disclaimers that you want to talk about before we get started into some of the questions?
Um, well, it looks like Mitski's going to join us. He's begging at the door, so I'm going to let him out. Hi, buddy. Um, you know, you say, like, you know, the critical thinking, the spotting myths. It's it's a lot of trial and error, and it's a lot of simply just practice. You're going to make mistakes with and everybody gets suckered into myths. There are a lot of things, you know. I made so many mistakes in the early, like in the first 5 years, and I still make mistakes. And that's why it is. Oh, you want to go that way? Okay, fine. Mitski said no. Maybe he'll come this
Zone.
way. He probably wants to hang out on top with the sea lamps. Um,
Classic.
it's don't beat yourself up. Mainly, if with going through these myths today, if there's something that you thought was absolutely true, and then you realize, and, we talk about it and say, yeah, that's a bunch of nonsense. Don't beat yourself up about it. Really, it's nothing to be ashamed of. The only thing to be ashamed of is if you decide to defend an unsubstantiated belief. If you can change when new information is presented, that's one of the best skills that you can have.
You got to let that ego go to really learn and grow.
Ego. It's a daily fight.
Real. All right, so let's jump in here. First question that we have, and I hope I say this correctly, my nocturnal or crepuscular
Yeah. Well,
species doesn't need UVB or basking spot. I guess it's not really a question, it's a scenario.
Yeah.
But a myth.
Yes, a myth. So there is some truth to this about the UVB. With crepuscular animals, and obviously with nocturnals as well. Honestly, I just prefer the term nocturnal. I because it means night active, and a lot of the animals that are night active are going to have some activity around the dawn dusk area anyway. It's very rare that you see something that is strictly like sun has to be all the way down and then I come out. So just for reference, I prefer to say nocturnal and encompass the entirety of, there's diurnal and nocturnal. The guys who are out when the sun's out and the guys who aren't out when the sun's out. So for this group of animals, yes, around the time that the sun goes down and comes up, there's actually, you can look at a chart. This information is not hard to find. UVI is 0. There is no UV during their active period at dawn, dusk, midnight. There's just none. But we have to consider where they're sleeping. And usually, and it really does depend on the species. But say crested geckos are a great argument for this one. A lot of people are like, oh, crested geckos don't need heat, they don't need UV, they get along fine. Get along fine is a dangerous term that we see all over the hobby, because they have gotten along fine and we've been able to get them to breed, and a lot of people hold breeding to be the highest standard, and breeding is, or it was 20 years ago. Breeding is no longer the accomplishment for a lot of these species that it used to be. And that's one of those ego things, you know. So something to bear in mind there is just because it works doesn't mean it's optimal. Now, with what are you doing with your fan, dude? Okay, sorry. I'm just gonna keep checking on him to make sure he's not getting into trouble. We have to consider where they're sleeping, and with crested geckos. So thanks to Thomas Marriott's field work with crested geckos, we're getting a lot more information on an animal that we were otherwise, it was a lot of trial and error, just figuring out what worked, what didn't, because we had no idea really what their native environment was like and what they were doing in New Caledonia. Now we have video footage and documented observations of what they're doing, and they're sleeping out kind of in the open on these trees. I mean, this isn't a densely packed forest. The trees are relatively spaced. There's not a ton of dense foliage. They're sleeping on the trunks. They're sleeping on the branches. Sunlight gets through those leaves. New Caledonia is relatively close to the equator, so that sun is fairly strong. And so it's coming through that leaf cover, and it's hitting them as they sleep. And so they're getting low level UV, UVA, UVB, even while they're not actively basking. They're also getting background infrared as well. Whether or not they're actually getting the infrared A from, being hit by a direct beam of sunlight, it's kind of irrelevant here. But the point being, they are getting temperature differences. They are choosing where to sleep based on what is comfortable, what they need. So maybe if they want to be cooler, they're going to look for a hollow, look for a more shaded area. If they want to be warmer, they're going to look for a warmer area to sleep in. They choose the places that they sleep with intention, and that includes the UV part of the equation. This is going to come up probably a few times through this discussion as well, but with reptiles, one of the best things we can do is get out of their way, actually. When constructing a reptile enclosure, you want it to be able to allow that reptile to take care of itself. That's what reptiles do as poikilotherms. They are thermoregulators. They're not thermoconformers. And so that means they are very actively involved in managing their own metabolism and utilizing the resources within their environment to meet their needs. Whether they aren't feeling well and so they warm up more than usual, which is called a behavioral fever, or they need to rest, conserve energy, they seek an area that is cooler. They're for long periods of time, whether it is, whenever the resources are scarce, whether the weather is too hot or too cold, so brumation and estivation, they are seeking a cooler area to rest, to survive, to keep the metabolism at a low burn, so that they can survive until the next season when resources are available, or the next day. So it's all this very intricate process, and the thing is, we are not them. We cannot say, oh, I know what is best for you. Like, you should be basking right now. People have tried to do that. This is pretty common in the bearded dragon community, actually. Oh, my bearded dragon isn't basking often enough, so I move him to his basking spots every day. And it's like, you really don't need to do that.
They evolved to be successful in their respective niche or environment.
Yes, when we micromanage these reptiles that we do not know what they actually need, because one, they can't tell us, and two, we function very differently than they do, and three, we probably have a misunderstanding of what they need in that moment anyway. When we get in the way of their instincts, it's only going to hurt them. So our best bet is to set up their enclosures in a way that gives them everything, all of the ingredients that they could possibly need for good health, and then let them be the chef of their own body, of their own kitchen.
Yeah, and these conversations are gonna kind of bleed into one another, but you've touched on one of the, I think you talked about on the Animals at Home podcast, the 5 domains or factors that allow an animal to be as successful as possible, or the model for animal welfare. So like nutrition's one, environment's the other, health, behavioral interactions, and mental state. And so we're talking about the nutrition one right now, but they all kind of bleed into one another.
Yes.
And I think that I don't know if I'm saying it exactly how you said it, but there's part of that. It might not work, or it might work, but it's not adequate. I might not have said that exactly how you said that, but
yeah.
Would you be able to expand on that a little bit more? Because I think they'll often say an animal's hardy, and just because something's working and it's surviving, that it's okay. But that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to double check on Mitski.
We don't need any reptile escapees.
Nah. Just making sure he's not being naughty.
Yeah.
That's the thing with more active snakes. You don't know what they're going to get up to. He recently escaped through a much smaller gap in the door than I thought he was capable of doing. But that was my bad. A branch got in the way. And he came around. I found him a few days later, but it was a tense few days because this basement is unfinished. And I thought he was gone for good.
Yep. Oh, there's those few days where you're just coming down and you're constantly looking it's the worst feeling.
Like at the studs, at the holes in the insulation. I'm like, it's going to take an act of God.
Yes. One of my little pygmy lizards escaped the other day, and thank God, like I did find him like a few days later. Just I moved the broom, plopped right in front of my foot, and Mariah, I was
that is an act of God.
It really.
Wow.
I was like, okay, thank you, and we'll keep it moving. Make sure all the holes are plugged.
Oh yeah. So, micros are a whole different level.
Yeah, no, they're tough. They're tough.
Yeah, so let's talk about, so what you mentioned there is survival versus thriving. Survival is, what does the animal need to stay alive? Staying alive for an animal is not just constrained to the individual. It means you have to expand it to the species. Survival means, what does it take to preserve the species, which means that successful breeding, is technically also under the survival umbrella. It is not good enough if the animal is alive and seemingly healthy, but unable to breed. That is actually below the survival threshold. And that's when breeding becomes an accomplishment. If you have a species where we have not been able to get them to breed, and we finally find the key to getting them to breed, then noting what circumstances it takes to get that species to breed is incredibly important. Often that's where seasonal variation in cycling comes into play, because that has to do with hormones, and when the hormones aren't right, the animal won't breed unless it's super, super hardy and will just breed under any circumstances whatsoever. It sounds crazy, but it has happened. Like animals breeding in deli cups, kind of crazy. It doesn't sound possible, but it is there. There's plenty of documented cases. Meanwhile, you have touchy species like sandfish, savanna monitors, much harder to breed. And we think we have them nailed, but we still haven't done this basic thing. And so for me as a husbandry researcher, paying attention to those incidences is really important. So survival is not to be discounted at all. It is a very important part of the process, but it's not where the journey ends. That is not our destination. It may have been our destination 20 years ago, but it is 2026. And we are moving into now that we have our foundations pretty well settled, we need to look forward, not be comfortable with what we already have. And that's where thriving and the standards of animal welfare come into. So now that we have we know what food they eat. We know how much, space they need not to go completely crazy. We know what temperatures they need not to overheat or die of hypothermia. How to keep them relatively disease-free. All of those under the survival umbrella. Now it's, how do we make them happy? How do we optimize their health? How do we keep them in good body condition? How do we prevent illness before it starts? How do we get them breeding with minimal repercussions? How do we help them, so fewer slugs, fewer bad eggs, more success in breeding, bigger clutches, bigger litters, healthier babies that are not just healthy when they're born or hatched, but are healthy into adulthood, because the health of the parents affects the health of the offspring. So expanding our view to these factors is where thriving comes in, and that's my niche right there and what I talk about most often. And that is where a lot of arguments happen in our hobby, is the people who are like, I know what it takes to make these animals survive. I've seen too many die. I've seen too many that aren't surviving, and that makes me scared of deviating from this script, which is totally understandable. But that's where you start to see the clash between people who are trying to advance husbandry, like me, and people who work with sick animals, like reputable rescuers and veterinarians. That's where we clash, is they're the ones who are experts in survival. Breeders, too, can fall into this, because they are often very concerned with the survival of neonates, which is no small thing. But when you have people talking about the finer points, that's where more confusion happens. That is scary, because you know that it's easier to make a mistake when you start to expand and get into these weeds that are harder to implement, harder to wrap your head around. And that's hard when you are trying to teach a new keeper. Is I want you to make sure that your animal is surviving, but I also want you to be looking at the bigger picture. I don't want you to be content with just the survival of your pet.
Yeah, and I think that's important for people that are starting to think about breeding, that are keepers, and allowing themselves that time to keep a species. And I know, like, both of us are Bill Strand people, so he talks a lot about going through a species' entire life. So like going from that neonate stage all the way to adulthood, and then at that point allowing those chameleons to breed and being prepared to take care of all of those neonates, because you know how much work, how much money goes into caring for such a reptile. And supplying the factors, or able to identifying the factors to allow an animal to thrive is one thing, and then you have the ethics and moral dilemma, especially for those people that are breeders and relying on their business as their livelihood. So that
certain concessions do need to be made when you are dealing with caring for a lot of animals at once, just for sanity reasons. And in a perfect world, we could all have big enough facilities with enough help to give every animal an optimal amount of space and resources, down to every single neonate. But the fact of the matter is, it is not a perfect world, and resources are limited for all breeders in the reptile hobby. And we have to start, I'd say we, like, I'm a breeder, I'm not. It's important to one, when you're talking to these people, keep in mind their limitations. Not all breeders are these heartless people who are in it for the money. They exist, but most people get into reptile breeding because they are genuinely passionate about the species. And usually you see that passion more with the less common species because those are the hobbyist breeders, the ones who are doing conservation work essentially through their breeding projects. And less so with, the ones who are breeding off already popular and overbred species. Bearded dragons, leopard geckos, corn snakes, ball pythons, need I say. It's getting to that point with hognose snakes. Gargoyle geckos are almost there.
Yep.
Probably everybody who keeps mourning geckos needs to stop. Mourning geckos are a problem.
Yep. Well, especially since they produce on their own, so
yeah, they're unstoppable. They're gonna take over the world. It's a good thing they're tropical.
They really are. Them and cockroaches, only things left.
Yeah, really though. So that's the thing to keep in mind there is with that conversation. And if you're interested in breeding, I don't want to discourage you. Speaking to the viewers, it's one, choose a species that interests you, that you can be passionate about, deeply passionate about. I mean, really just dive in, head first, have fun. Don't just pick a species because you think it's going to sell. Because if that's your mentality, it probably won't. The market is saturated in so many areas. I mean, all you have to do is go to a reptile expo to find out. And it's not good for you. It's not good for the animals. And it's going to make it harder to keep them well when you have animals that won't sell.
Yeah, and you're going to burn yourself out too.
And you're going to burn yourself out, yeah, because it's incredibly frustrating. There's at least one, basically every single expo that I go to as an educator, I spot them walking out with a pair of animals, and they say, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to breed these guys." Like they're in that bravado of, "I'm going to be a breeder in this hobby. Like this is how I'm going to fit in." And I have to say, please don't. I am telling you.
Yeah.
Like they won't sell. You don't know how to care for a bearded dragon to begin with. Like you're new to them. Like all of these things, like do not do this. I beg of you, as somebody who definitely tried to breed everything that she got her hands on as a kid. It's fun to play God. But dealing with the consequences is way worse.
Yeah. And even acquiring new animals and adding to your collection, we've all been there where it's it's so amazing, especially in the moment. Like waiting for that new animal, that reward system pathway is just really some dope.
Hit is huge.
Oh yeah. And then you get stressed out because you can't feed your animals because you don't have the money, or electricity goes out and now all of a sudden you have to find heat for your animals, or an animal goes missing that you've produced. Like so many times where you can be humbled as a breeder. And if you're not intentional about what you're doing, you can get over your head really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I bred ocellated skinks by accident because they are impossible to sex visually, and they hit sexual maturity at 1 year old, not 2, like I was told. And so, you're like, oh, you can keep these as a group. Great. It's always fun to keep things in a group when you have a species that is social. Yeah, their sociality is weird. I'm still working that one out. But, when you're keeping animals together that you actually don't know the gender of, bad things happen fast. And with skinks that will hide their gender until the day they die, like at least blue-tongue skinks produce sperm plugs, especially if you have other skinks in the room. But there are a lot of species that don't do that within Skinkidae. And all of a sudden, the only way you know is one's looking fat and suddenly drops a litter of babies, which are alive because skinks, not just eggs, or 2, all of a sudden 2 or 3 of your animals are ripping each other to shreds because, they're male. They're male, they're sexually mature, and they are ready to go.
Yep. No, we're going to be touching on cohabiting later on in this conversation. So, but just to bring us back to the UVB conversation, there was I got you, Mariah. Bill told me, he's like, I got to pay attention to the agenda and the chat, and I was like, I got you, Bill. I'll do that. I'll do a better job of that. All right. So one of the myths that we had, and this actually runs in tandem with UVB, was I don't provide a basking lamp because my reptile room temperature is quite warm.
Yes.
Or just the room is quite warm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is something that I dealt with recently. I deal with this a lot for crested gecko people. They, they've been taught that you can keep the animal in an ambient temperature as long as it's comfortable. They don't need to add others. And that's one of the appeals of crested geckos. That's how they sell, is you can have a reptile without life support equipment. How neat is that? Massive myth. Massive, massive myth. It just means that their range of tolerance is very narrow. That's it. And just because they can get along at room temperature, which actually is a huge range. People say room temperature and they assume 72 degrees, but some people's room temperature is 68 or lower, and some people's room temperature is all the way up to 80, depending on what part of the world they live in and what kind of house they live in, and what season it is too. So you can't just say it'll be fine. You got to give them a set of temperatures. You got to teach them how to control the temperatures. If the room's too warm, well, you should probably cool it down. You have to, especially in the case of certain species that not just prefer but need a nighttime drop in order to thrive, like montane chameleons. You're going to have to implement an air conditioner. Maybe a swamp cooler, but they boost humidity, but they're actually not that great at cooling. And when you're trying to get things down to, 60, 50s even, things get really dicey. It's hard to reproduce this in your average human house. And that factors into the difficulty of keeping these animals. So say with a crested gecko, you have somebody who comes to me saying, oh, well, I don't need to worry about, a heat lamp. That's not necessary for me because my room is warm. I ask, how warm is your room? They say 78 degrees. And I say, yeah, that is pretty warm.
Yeah.
But it is important to still provide a way for the animal to thermoregulate. And arguably, if you don't have the animal yet and you just know the temperature of the room, you're just saying, I'm thinking about getting this animal and I know it's going to be easier to set up because it's so warm in my room already. I don't need to provide heat. I will say, if your room is already that warm, choose a more heat tolerant reptile. Do not pick something that is just going to be comfortable in ambient temperature because your room is so warm. Heat stress kills. Too warm will kill much faster than too cool with a reptile. And this is what we see with crested geckos and other New Caledonian species very often. They get too hot and it's not instant, but it's very hard to recover from. It just dehydrates them. It puts them under stress. And depending on how hardy that particular species is, that individual, the age, that can really set them into decline. So it's a bad idea to rely on ambient just because of the risk of overheating. But, if you already have the animal and you have a warm room and for one reason or another you can't cool it down, then I say don't get rid of the animal. The best person to care for that animal is you. And you just have to take that into account. And if it is truly too warm to be able to provide a heat lamp safely, and that 78 degrees is a real danger zone for crested geckos, then you say, well, instead let's provide an LED bar for daytime light. And guess what? Those produce a small amount of infrared additional heat that they can choose to bask under if they want. It's a very small amount, but when your margin is that narrow, it can actually do something. My morning geckos, actually, because they like to be on the underside of the mesh, will use their LED bar as a heat source. And I'm like, okay, fine. I've had my oscillated skinks. If I put one of their magnetic platforms close enough to the LED, they'll bask under it too. It's bright, it's warm, it's just a little bit. If they want gentle heat, that's where they're going to find it. And then UV. Make sure that the UV is there, and maybe there's not infrared A, so it's not the best that it could be, but you're making the best out of what you have, and that's the important thing in that case. But
And is there? Yeah. Oh, sorry, my bad, Mariah. Go ahead.
Oh, just summarizing that, the TLDR of that whole thing is if you have the animal, do the best with what you have, optimize what you can, try not to stress about the things you cannot change. If you don't have the animal yet, pick a different species.
For what about those people that might say, well, because there's a lot of natural light in the room, that quantifies as the UVB, and it maybe even for some people the heat. Like, what could be the dangers in that?
Well, when you're relying on sunlight as heat through a window, that is a uncontrolled variable. That's going to vary from day to day. And if you have, heaven forbid, a glass enclosure in front of a window, that's the greenhouse effect. You know how greenhouses stay so warm in the winter? It's because sunlight passes through the material that the greenhouse is made of, and it creates heat on the inside. And greenhouses usually have vents, usually an automated venting system to maintain a certain temperature within that greenhouse. Your average terrarium, no, does not have an automated venting system to control the temperature. Worse, it's not the ideal form of infrared, so you could provide better heat with the right heat lamp. And also, it's not actually giving your animal any UV. Not a significant amount. UVB, although UVA can pass through glass, UVB cannot. It is filtered by glass and plastic, even which is why you can't trust your eyes. We cannot see UVB. We just have to trust that it is there. We have to use specialized instruments, specifically the solar meter 6.5, to know whether it is there, how much is present. And it doesn't come from windows. A lot of people still, this is one of actually those myths that has been around for so long that I've thought, surely we've gotten past this. Surely this is common knowledge by now that UVB cannot get through windows. And yet it still crops up. And so that humbles me as an educator. I'm like, oh, okay, we really have to take a step back here. And don't just assume that people know these things, because if I skip the education on this, then there could actually be harm done. Oh, and
Yep. Lights are off. UVB's off.
Sundown is approaching, so I might have to adjust my lamps. I have everything in here on staggered on timers, smart timers, according to based on local sunrise and sunset times, which is pretty neat when they work.
Do you have Luminize by chance? Do you have the Luminize by chance?
I have experimented with the Luminize. Yes, I don't like it. The Luminize has to be manually programmed and does not automatically sync with your local times. If it did, I would be a bigger fan. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't. And so I have to go in, and when you've got multiple enclosures to be managing, yeah, it's a massive pain. Plus, they're not very reliable. The software is finicky at best. And I find the ramping quality is nice, but it's not that great. It's just not worth the price.
No, in theory, it's great.
In theory,
but
yes.
In theory, it's great. But no, and the software, that's where I'm coming into troubles with. Like, the last few days, I've had to wake up at like 3 a.m. because I've noticed that my chameleon light is on, and I'm like, when is it turning on? So I had to figure out, like, when is this turning on? How is the time on?
Even with smart timers, you have these hiccups in the software, and I don't know why it happens, but so I have to go in. So I use Casa. I have to go in every once in a while, and I have to reset it. I have to reset, sync my location. I have to sync it with what time zone I'm in, and that will reset all of the devices, which granted are too many devices on one router, poor thing.
We're working.
But this was happening with fewer of them too. And so sometimes they do just pop on in the middle of the night and fortunately, I have a 1-year-old who still occasionally wakes up in the middle of the night. So, I'm going downstairs and I pass the door to the basement, like, there's a glow. Why is there a glow in the basement? No, no. How long have you
When like the reptiles just give you like the stink eye, just
and
like
you're
one eye
like,
open.
hi. And you're like, I'm so sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
What was the
My bad.
worst though was when I lived in this apartment and my first child, she shared a room with the reptiles.
Yep.
So
That's a
that's where she slept
dream
at
come
night.
true.
But it was my worst nightmare. Like I had to be so on top of making sure that everything was synced because those lights could flick on in the middle of the night and wake up my baby.
And then you're up too. So
Like that
yeah.
was it's one thing when it wakes up the reptiles. It's another thing when it wakes up the baby. Like that is category 5 emergency. So it's even the better tech is still not perfect. Yeah, the Luminize, I'm hoping it gets fixed, but I'm not optimistic about it.
Yeah. There hasn't been an up.
Arcadia has this sad trend of overhyping their products, over marketing and under delivering. So, or delivering exactly as much as they should, but no more. And it's the gimmicky things where you start to see instability. I respect John Courtney Smith quite a bit for his contributions to the industry. And Arcadia products are generally very trustworthy, but just like every other brand, you have to take marketing claims with a grain of salt.
Yeah. No, I use the other like Jungle Dawn, other UVB.
Oh yeah, Jungle Dawn's my go-to for LED.
Yep. But yeah, the Luminize, we have some beef.
Yeah, just save yourself the money, guys, and just use the normal ones. Unless you really, really want to play with it and you have 1 or 2 enclosures.
Yeah. No, it's not worth it. All right, moving on. I do want to get to, I know you've been talking a lot about enclosure size and we're at like 6:48. So I don't know how much time you have, Mariah, but I do want to also touch on cohabbing, just because this has kind of been a little bit of a hot topic and it does depend, and it is variable depending upon species. So what is your outlook and what has your research told you in terms of cohabbing?
Cohabbing. So, first, cohabbing is one of those more advanced keeping techniques. It is potentially the next frontier in reptile husbandry, just like a multi-species fish tank, a multi-species dart frog tank. It can be done. We have to be very careful about it. And the fact of the matter is, with reptiles being larger than fish by quite a bit, and they need quite a bit more space, we have to take that into consideration. Crowding is the number one cause of conflict when it comes to cohabbing. When you avoid crowding and provide enough visual barriers, so opportunities for the animals to escape each other's attention, that does a lot. It reduces the competition between them, making sure that they have different areas to bask, different areas to eat. And so you see people, who keep multiple tortoises. You often see in Australia reptile pits where, you have a lot of blue-tongued skinks and bearded dragons in the same pit. You just see these cohabbing situations in zoos. This is very common. And because 1, it's impressive. 2, it's efficient when you do it right. And so it gets people thinking, well, why can't I do it? Well, because you're trying to do it in a 4x2x2 in your apartment. That is very different from the way that, when you have so much more space and resources in a large zoo exhibit, in an outdoor enclosure. And so it's all about resources at the end of the day. And space is a very big and limited resource. So that's why most cohabbing situations fail, is lack of resources. Usually not enough space, and then competing for basking spots, hiding spots, food, etc. So that's what you really have to keep in mind. And I try to, where I can, work it out into math. Usually you can math out how many animals you can cram into a single enclosure. For ocellated skinks, I've got it down to, right now, the formula is 2.5 square feet for one, add 1.4, preferably 1.5 square feet for each additional individual. And then for height, more than 12 inches is a bonus, but recommended. So that's kind of the formula I've developed there. I can't remember the exact number for morning geckos, but honestly, it kind of becomes a moot point. I say you start with a certain size of enclosure and they expand to fill it, not in size, but in number. And you just have to get comfortable with the idea that they are going to self-manage their own population density. And yeah, more reasons why they're not great pets. The let's see what my viper geckos, so micro geckos, this is where cohabiting actually becomes feasible, is with the smaller species, because you can more easily provide a generous amount of space, and in some ways it's actually better because it makes installing the life equipment, the life support equipment, that much easier. But some of them tolerate crowding a little bit better than others. Viper geckos get along pretty well with each other. They're a low conflict species. You have a group of males and no females, they have nothing to fight about. They'll just be bros.
Yep, just hang out.
Mm-hmm.
Like even during different seasons, like there's no change in behavior.
No change in behavior whatsoever. I've never seen conflict between those guys, and it's been a few years now.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I know I keep my Tachydromus sexlineatus together currently.
Yeah, how's that going?
It's going all right now. I mean, they're wild caught, so they're in quarantine. So eventually they will get split up into pairs. But the only other species that I cohab is the Caphodostumbara, and they're split up into pairs. So I don't have them in a colony.
Yeah.
But I've not had any issues with them in terms of like breeding or the male being overly dominant with the female. I actually had a female give birth recently, and the male has actually, like, I haven't really seen the male. I've seen him in the background, and the female's always in the front. And I can tell, I feel like he's giving the female space because she has given birth. He better is right. But up until that point, like they would spoon at night. They would be insane the entire time. And so, again, there's not enough scientific information to really back that. It's just observational data at this point. But like chameleons, you would never cohab.
Yeah.
Like that would not happen.
Yeah. And you bring up some really, really great points, actually. So yeah, pairs. It's one thing to talk about keeping a colony of animals or, a multi-species enclosure exhibit, really. And it's another thing to talk about just keeping a pair of animals for the purpose of breeding. Some animals do great when they have a mate all the time. Some species like toke geckos do pretty well when they have a mate. Lychee geckos do pretty well when they have a mate around. But there's others who only want to see another member of their species, especially of the opposite sex, during breeding season. And that's it. And so they'll be buddy-buddy for a little while, and they'll even breed better when they don't see them all year. I know Phil Leitz talks about this a lot, where, it's common practice for your Euromastix breeders to just keep their pairs together all the time, but he sees better results when they're kept separated, and he's keeping the spark alive by only letting them see each other during breeding season or around that time. They have more aggressive breeding behavior, aggressive in the way that they are enthusiastic about it, more enthusiastic, better breeding results because of that, instead of being sick of each other. So knowing your species, knowing their tendencies, and whether it is whether they do better together or separate is very important for breeding pairs. And then neonates. Some babies do great with mom. Like blue-tongued skinks. It seems to be that it's a good idea to keep, at least with northern blue-tongued skinks, to keep babies with mom for a little while. And everybody seems to do better. Often with just neonates in general, they prefer to be together. There's some kind of safety in numbers. Not all, but a good number of species, they like to stay together. And it's also important for the development of their social behaviors, letting them be with their siblings for a little while to have low-scale squabbles, as long as, they have enough space and resources, so that they can learn how to be a good member of their species. Especially if one of them is going to be a breeder later on, you need that animal to have social skills if it's going to breed. just like with humans. Um, so social skills are a big consideration there, and it does raise the question of, if we're separating these animals essentially at birth, and then we're seeing conflicts later in life and we try to put them together, say leopard geckos, in theory they should be able to live in colonies when they have enough resources. We see it in the wild, but in captivity we see them squabbling. They're often separated after hatching. Maybe they don't have social skills, and maybe we would have better results if, if somebody wanted to keep a colony of leopard geckos, if they purchased only for that colony geckos that are not necessarily siblings, but geckos that were raised with their siblings for a certain amount of time, so that have developed social skills.
Yeah, and providing them the adequate amount of space to have different basking sites, water resources, cool hides, warm hides.
Yeah, so I mean, you can hear, what this comes down to is, this is complicated. This is very advanced. This is reptile keeping 500. This is not to be attempted by a newbie in any way. There's just a lot of nuance to it and a lot that can go wrong. So when, you hear the people say, do not keep them with other members of their species, it is best practice. It is that precaution for newbies. And then, you can add the nuance after. See, once you've gained enough experience, if you're an experienced keeper and know what to look for in, for conflict in snakes, conflict in lizards, then you can start to dabble a little bit in cohabitation. Like, honestly, oh, there it goes. Give me a minute.
Back on.
There we go. Yeah, I knew that was going to happen. That was plugged into a timer. The power strip the bound.
I was going to say, is that the Luminize coming on you after we were just talking about it?
Yeah, I do have a lot of Luminizes, but they're just because, I totally bought into that Kool-Aid. But, and I couldn't return them because they're lamps. So they're just treated like ordinary lamps around here.
$250 lamps.
Like, I'd rather spend that money on a Faunalux or something, or a Soul.
Right?
But the last note about cohabbing that I wanted to bring up is that paper I was telling you about, Tyler, with ball pythons. This, ever since Liam of Reptiles and Research made a video about this. So people were talking about it when the paper came out. People were sharing it around their Facebook groups. And a little bit of chatter in like TikTok and Instagram too about this landmark paper. And then I've seen a resurgence in interest ever since Liam made this video. So the study is in itself interesting. It's kind of a one-off. As far as I know, it hasn't been replicated yet. So to give a summary of the study, a bunch of juvenile ball pythons were put into a pit together, essentially, with a variety of hides to choose from. All of them were the same size, the same shape, the same temperature. Everything was the same except for the location of these hides. And all of these young ball pythons were in the same space together. And the study was examining their behavior, marking which hides were they hanging out in. Were they hanging out together? Were they hanging out separately? How much space were they putting between each other? And the results of this study was that they found that these young ball pythons they demonstrated a pretty strong preference for being in the same hide together. Almost all the time. There were exceptions every once in a while, and you got to wonder what happened to that poor little guy who got kicked out. But like maybe he felt like he didn't fit, or somebody smelled bad. I don't know. But for the most part, there was a very strong preference to the point where you can't ignore the fact that they were grouping together and seeming to seek each other out socially. So people have taken this study out of context and said, oh, well, this means that ball pythons are social, right? This means that we should be keeping ball pythons together. This is one of the things that happens when you only read the abstract of a paper and not, the methodology behind it and you don't think critically about what's going on. One, this has not been replicated. This is a one-off study. Two, this has only been done with juvenile ball pythons. As previously discussed, juveniles can act very differently from adults. They may prefer to be with each other when they're young, but not when they're adults. Maybe, it helps to be in a ball with other neonates because they share warmth. They lose heat and moisture at a lower rate when they are together than when they are separate. So it is a survival skill to be with other members of their species at this delicate time of life, because they do lose heat and they do lose moisture very quickly. It's so easy to babies are hard. They're just very delicate. They have a lot of needs, and they're not able to regulate their bodies as well as adults can. Makes sense. They're babies. And so that might be a factor as well, they're trying to survive, but they're not necessarily seeking each other out for social reasons. Are they developing social skills when they're together? Yeah, probably. But we need more. We need this study to be done again in different circumstances with more animals. More research is being done. We do see examples of what appears to be successful cohabitation in zoo exhibits for ball pythons, but whether they truly prefer to be with each other is an entirely different question. And that's where people are coming to me and like, hey, so I saw this. Should I be, one, is this best practice to keep ball pythons together? Hasn't been established yet. All we know is that we have this study, and that in the wild, we are not finding adult ball pythons rooming together, generally speaking. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, is this is what has been established. It is safe to say we are not going to consider them social yet. Do not cohab because you're trying to, because you think it might be better than keeping them singly. That might not be the case. Now, if they're neutral towards each other, which it seems they are, social behaviors have absolutely been documented in ball pythons, in adults for that matter. I can't remember the exact term right now, but it's essentially mirroring, where you have two snakes in the same hide and they will both adopt the same or a very similar posture to each other. Where, like, if one has its head out of the hide, the other one will have its head out of the hide in a similar kind of posture, and they mirror each other in this, like, we're getting along kind of fashion. And when the animals aren't getting along, they don't mirror each other. So you have that. We know that there's communication going on. But just because the animals have social behaviors and can communicate with other members of their species doesn't necessarily mean that they are eusocial or truly social, in the sense that they want to be with other members of their species 24/7. Occasionally introducing a reptile to another reptile can be beneficial in a drive-by situation in which, you have two snakes out wandering at the same time and you're keeping an eye on them, but they have they have the opportunity to avoid each other. They have the opportunity to check each other out. As long as, there's no chance of them potentially thinking the other is food. Like, if you have a king snake, just don't risk it. So, is your snake a opportunistic snake eater, or is it, does it prefer warm-blooded prey? That makes a difference. All of these factors coming in, but yeah, with the ball python study, just wait. Don't step on the gas quite yet. If you're an experienced keeper, then you can say, maybe you can explore this a little bit. You know what to do. If you're new to ball pythons and you're just like, oh, more ball pythons, yay! No.
Yeah.
That is the wrong mentality.
So I do have a couple questions about the methodology, and I wasn't able to really fully read the paper. So if we don't have the answers right now, but we can always reread the paper, or those answers might not be.
I don't have the clearest memory, but I'll do my best.
Okay. The first question I had was just lineage of the parents. And again, this might not be a factor that matters, but were those parents wild caught? How long have that lineage of ball python been in captivity? How long have they been bred? Does that even correspond to behavior for snakes? Is it different than like monitor lizards that are wild caught and or captive bred? And then the other questions I have is, time length and period of time that those snakes were housed together, and what did feeding look like?
They were separated
Those,
for feeding.
okay,
Yes.
but in the wild, they would at some point have to disperse,
Mm-hmm.
find food, or if some food came in contact with them, I guess what would that look like?
They would compete if you had two snakes, one mouse kind of situation. There would be competition for sure. As a matter of preferably who gets it first, and not two snakes are each have one end of the mouse, and one might potentially accidentally eat the other because of it. Which is often how accidents happen with cohab snakes. Is when you feed them together, they're so focused on eating that they don't notice that they're eating their roommate. That's pretty well documented. Lineage was not really discussed, but we can probably, aside from the fact that I believe all of these ball pythons were siblings. I think they all came from the same clutch. Parents were probably captive bred. I seriously doubt they were wild caught, given that the study was performed in the United States. And most of the ball pythons here are captive bred. Not always. Wild caughts still sneak in, which is incredible. We really don't need wild caught ball pythons at this point. But the let's see. Captive breeding status, it can affect the tameness of a reptile in the sense of whether it's been around humans from day one or not. But in terms of their social behavior from out of the egg, I don't think it's going to have much of an effect. Reptiles are most animals are pretty dang instinctive in their earliest days, and so there's not going to be a lot of outside factors that change their behavior significantly. They're going to be acting pretty much based on their programming.
And I'm sorry, I'm trying to read through the chat. I told Bill Strand I was going to be better at reading the chat. He gave me that tip. I was like, okay, I promise, Bill, I'll be better. There, one of our audience members, Mikey, he had a question about. I'll try to fill in the gaps, but salmonella.
Okay, I think I saw that.
Yep. And I guess what new research is there about salmonella in reptiles? Are there certain types of reptiles that have salmonella more so than others?
Salmonella. Okay.
Yeah.
Zoonotic diseases. Let's go. So, the danger of salmonella from reptiles is generally massively overhyped. You can get a disease from just about any pet that you have. What's the bacteria from cats that endangers pregnant women? I can't remember what it is right now. But so cats can get people sick. Dogs can get people sick. Fish can get people sick. Birds can get people sick. Horses can get people sick. Whether it's a parasite, whether it's a bacteria, usually not a virus. They're typically specialized unless you have a mutation going on. Bird flu, swine flu, those are mutations that have jumped from animal to human, or non-human animal to human. So with salmonella, usually it's a concern of, it's Giardia, really? That was not the one I was thinking of. It started with a T. But
it's not Streptococcus? Streptococcus?
Not Streptococcus. Bacteria. So something. Anyway, that's usually I can remember this, but I guess not right now.
Okay. No good. All good.
Yeah. Baseline, cats can get you sick. when you handle their feces. Surprise, surprise. Feces are gross. And, you can get salmonella from chicken eggs because it is endemic to chickens. You can get salmonella from raw chicken meat. You can get E. coli from beef. Usually it comes down to not a matter of the animal itself being inherently dirty. Toxoplasmosis, yes. The man, that derailed me for a second there. It's okay. It's okay. I got so excited. So it's all about hygiene at the end of the day. So if the animal is in a generally hygienic environment that you are, replacing the substrate on a regular basis, the animal is healthy. We're talking with reptiles, like you're washing your hands or wearing gloves while, doing your reptile work, then that's going to keep you healthy. Salmonella from reptiles is actually really rare. Where the scare came from, if we trace it back, was back when, so actually we can blame Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for this. As is usually the case, media influences the exotic animal trade. And so when TMNT got popular, people wanted pet turtles. This was during my childhood. And this was before the rule was implemented that pet stores can't sell turtles smaller than 4 inches across. And why did that rule come about? Because young children were swallowing turtles, baby turtles. Yes. I think there's a book written about it, actually, where somebody's little brother or sister swallows their pet turtle. And there go the lights.
There it is. I have so many questions for you that swallowed the pet turtle.
It is officially sunset in Utah, just so you know. So you have people getting pet turtles, usually red-eared sliders, because they were inexpensive and accessible, because they watched TMMT, or the kid did, and begged him for a pet turtle. And then, they proceeded to name them after the heroes. And so you have young children handling a reptile that swims in its own poop. Like, turtles are dirty. Turtles are very, very, very dirty.
Yeah.
They
and
are
our children.
difficult. It is difficult to keep their enclosures clean. They are not only swimming in their own poo, they're swimming in their own food. These guys eat live, raw fish. So all of those raw fish germs are also getting mixed up in their water. Then you take this thing out and give it to a small child to pet, to hold, to whatever, and all of those germs get all over their hands. And let me tell you, as somebody with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, what do young children do with their hands? Stick them in their mouth, stick them all over their face, mucous membranes, everything. Like, those bacteria are getting in. So no wonder it was around this time that there was a huge epidemic of salmonella. And so what was the FDA or the CDC was like, yeah, turtles are bad. Reptiles are going to give you salmonella. Stop having reptiles if you have kids, because this. And so they took this one incidence, and because they didn't understand, or they didn't care to understand the exact circumstances of what caused this problem, that's a little too shady. That's how you get salmonella from a reptile, is bad hygiene. That's how you get it from food too. Eating raw cookie dough can give you either E. coli from the flour or salmonella from the eggs. So, when you make safe cookie dough, you have to omit the eggs because that's a binding agent anyway. You don't need it. And you have to pre-bake the flour. You don't wash raw meat in your sink. That gets, wherever the droplets spray, the bacteria is going to spray as well. You disinfect your sink. You don't wash vegetables in a contaminated sink. You make sure the sink is clean and disinfected properly with an actual disinfectant, not vinegar. Guys, stop calling vinegar a disinfectant. It's not. Get a real veterinary disinfectant or a real household disinfectant. I don't care if it's hypochlorous acid or F10SC or Rescue. They're all good, or chlorhexidine, just use it properly according to the instructions on the label. But like, really, like I can do a lot of recommendations for disinfectants. I had a baby in the NICU for 2 months. Like, I can hook you up with the great animal grade disinfectants and the human grade ones. But yeah, it's at the end of the day really like good hygiene, common sense. If you have a turtle and you need to clean out its filter, in your in a bathroom sink or in your bathtub for lack of space, disinfect the thing with a 10% bleach solution. Bleach is cheap. Like, just be smart.
Yeah, no, I agree. The F10 is something I use, and also, do you use a steamer as well?
Do not
I just
have a steamer. I haven't really seen the need for one. I do use a steam mop for my floors, but I haven't gotten an actual steamer yet. It's on the list, but it isn't too high priority.
okay, because I found coccidia a while back in one of my panther chameleons. So
Coccidia, yeah. Ammonia can help with coccidia, but steam is definitely much more preferable to ammonia fumes.
yeah, kill all those oocysts.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, ammonia is like the way to do it on the cheap, but steam is the better way to do it for sure.
So one other question that we had in the group was from I just said, any thoughts on grow tents for reptiles? I was banned from the ball python Reddit for suggesting a grow tent enclosure because the mod said it was harmful advice.
Well, your first mistake was the ball python Reddit. Some Reddits are okay. Do I base that? Do I base that on whether or not they recommend my resources? Maybe. So ReptiFiles does not cover grow tents because I have no experience with grow tents, and grow tents are their own thing. I need to experiment with one, and there's a certain snake that needs a home from a rescue that I enjoy that I'm like, oh, I need to finish reconstructing all of my own habitats, but it's a rescue. That's my weakness. Reptile experts, I can stay strong for the most part, but when an animal needs rehoming, I'm like,
I need you. I'll help you.
for a good cause. I'll take one for
Yep.
the team.
Yep. Raise your karma points.
Yeah. So grow tents can be great. Someone said it's something about the dishwasher. Was that about salmon?
It was Dean Mismer said, so instead of washing chicken in the sink, use the dishwasher. Got it.
That's a new one. I've heard of washing vegetables in the dishwasher.
Did
that
it
one at
work
your
well?
own risk. I do not endorse that.
Okay. I've not tried that one, so.
Yeah. I've heard of cooking meat in a dishwasher too. In a bag.
Oh,
but that really sounds like mad science. Anyway, tangent. Back to the main point. Grow tents. So grow tents take a lot of modification. They can be very difficult to keep snakes with, specifically because they have certain gaps. They have ventilation gaps that can be easily exploited, and it is more difficult to create the right ventilation because you have to make cutouts in the grow tent, and then very securely put mesh over those cutouts to make it work, to keep the whole thing perfectly secure. Often they're just not great anyway because visibility is limited. You can't see your animal as much. Just, when you're walking by, you have a tiny little view window because these things are made for growing plants, and you have an animal inside that might be very much out of the view window. So you might have to make another cutout and put a piece of clear plastic over that, which may or not be extremely stinky to begin with. So, you have material concerns. You have grow tents are lined with a reflective material to, again, optimize plant growth. Great for plants, bad for eyeballs. It can really be a strain on the eyes. So you have to be very careful. What I've seen is people covering that up with some kind of matte material that just reduces the harsh glare, especially toward the ground level where the animal is going to be the most often. They're inexpensive. Is a really great inexpensive way to to create a larger enclosure, where otherwise the expense is going to be prohibitive, even for building your own. And if you're not able to build your own, you might be able to modify a grow tent. So I'm not going to discount them entirely. They do have their uses, as long as you go in with your eyes open and you have a mentor if you've never done it before. There's a group on Facebook that I like to refer people to. It's like Intense Reptiles, INTENTS, I think, or Intense Reptiles Amphibians. I'd have to double check, but it's something like that on Facebook. Most of the best forums I've found have been on Facebook. Reddit has a little bit too much contradiction. Not to say Reddit's bad. I am saying it's bad. Reddit, it's harder to get good information from. There's enough different groups on Facebook that that you can find a specialized group for the species and get better information, because it's more tightly moderated that way. What else was I going to say about grow tents? Grow tents can be optimal, like possibly the best way to keep certain species that do not interact well with clear barriers. So when they're high humidity and they have a tendency to rub their noses because they just really struggle with clear barriers, then a grow tent can be the best way to keep them. So I'm talking sailfin dragons and Chinese water dragons. These animals do not do well with glass or plastic. They are generally stressy in captivity, and they need a lot of space. And a grow tent can really help out with those needs.
Yeah, for the success stories, I've heard the sailfin dragon, Chinese water dragon, and is it the bearded bug guy has the blue Asian vine snake? I think he has a grow tent, maybe.
Oh, that's very possible. I just listened, or not just, but I listened to his episode of the Animals at Home podcast. I can't remember what species he's keeping in a grow tent.
I forgot what's in there. I think it's a colubrid, though.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard success stories with monitor lizards, and I've also heard the horror stories of people not adequately prepping.
Yes, I have concerns about monitor lizards and grow tents just because their claws, especially the larger species. A snake, you just have to worry about it exploiting a hole. Tegu, a large monitor. I mean, tegus are basically monitors just by a different name. It's kind of like the boa versus python difference. They can rip a hole.
I feel like a nail might get caught.
Nail could get caught in the material once it starts to fray. I mean, and they're not terribly stable. So if that thing decides to do something crazy like jump out a wall, which I wouldn't put it past either of those groups, they are crazy.
Yep.
They could potentially knock the thing over. Like you'd have to anchor it to keep it upright. Like there are dangers with the larger animals and the larger, more active ones.
Yeah, actually, Savannah was saying she encountered a chick that had 4 massive grow tents combined for her caiman lizard.
That'll do it, yeah. Again, we have a semi-arboreal, semi-aquatic species that needs a ton of space and tends to be stressy in captivity. Those are horrible pets just for the fact that they're snail specialists. Anytime you have a snail specialist, it gets hard, but like with snakes, they don't have to eat as much. With a lizard, you better be farming your own snails and have a friend who farms snails.
Yeah, which is hard to come by, believe it or not. Also, Mariah, someone had said, inexplicable creation said, love that shirt. One did chase my mama, though. So would you be able to show the audience the shirt?
Yeah, so hopefully you can read it. But basically, it says, if you got chased by a snake, no, you didn't.
Yep.
And this is a cottonmouth, because that's usually the story is they got chased by a cottonmouth, which is really funny because cottonmouths they're very lazy snakes. Their defense mechanism, as shown on the shirt, is they just go, look at my white mouth. That's why they're called a cottonmouth, is because of the cotton white mouth that is meant to startle, and startle it does. So a lot of people will insist that they got chased by a snake. Two things can happen. So, this isn't exclusive to a cottonmouth story. People will tell this story about any snake, really. So, one, you have the most common likelihood is they are trying to escape from you by going the same direction as you, because they have a bolt hole in the area where you are. And so they know where safety is, but it's actually near you. So they're relying on essentially speed to try to get away, but it looks like it's chasing you because you guys happen to be going in the same direction. The other, less likely, but still happens. No, I did not make the art. Or
I think someone said this is the painter of that.
Oh, really? I bought this from it's from LEARN's the Louisiana Exotic Animal Resource Network merch store. So this is Mitcha Petty's or Micah. I can't remember how his name's actually pronounced. I usually interact with him online. But yeah, so I don't know who we commissioned for this art, but maybe it was you. So good job. The other likelihood, less likely but still happens, is certain species of reptiles charge as a bluff, as a defensive bluff, and so they'll lunge at you, maybe even slither a little bit toward you, but it's not actually a threat. It's just a hey, I'm gonna get you, just to make you back off so they can run. Bull snakes are a good example. Pituophis in general, they're very bluffy snakes, so that's a good example. The first one that comes to mind. So yeah, usually it's either running away and in a convenient direction for the story, or it's a bluff charge.
Micah is actually, it is Micah. Misha or Micah? Did I say it right? It is. That is the person that did create that art. That person did. Yeah, super cool. Hello, welcome. But I was actually gonna ask you, Mariah. So I was living in Costa Rica for a little bit, and there was one time, I will say a snake chased me in quotes, but I was at like the dryer in the back in Costa Rica, like the first floor is open, and it did a great job of bluff charging me, but it was a snake, and it, like, I look over it and it just rose up, and I'm a reptile person, I know enough where I'm like, this can't be happening right now, like snakes don't do this. And then it did that like bluff charge, and I didn't even stay around. I just ran away. I don't even know what snake it was, but that was the only time I've ever like had anything happen with a snake. And I've walked by like timber rattlesnakes. They don't even rattle. So
yeah, it's very possible. The also, when you have snakes in more urban areas or more human occupied areas, it's not outside of the question to assume possibly that they have learned that acting like they're going to do something is a really good way to scare a human specifically.
Yep. Especially if you're living around a house, or, houses. So.
Yeah. Snakes are capable of learning. It's very simple cause and effect based learning. So if they, move a certain way and they notice it makes the human scream and run, then
do that again.
Do that. Yeah. They can do it again.
It worked well.
Yeah.
It worked very well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We're coming to. Oh, sorry. What were you saying, Mariah?
Just wondering if there's any other questions from the audience.
Yeah, I was going to say that we were coming up to 7:30, so I'm just going to read through. Mike says there are more interesting examples at the link. And it is pronounced Mike. So.
Sorry, dude. It's been a while since we last talked.
Nice to meet you. Species I work with also played to be best. Oh, Mikey says his favorite myth is that all snakes are venomous.
Wow,
get that.
That's a bad one.
Yeah, or all snakes are poisonous. That's even a worse one.
Honestly, I am so over it. It's just like the turtle versus tortoise thing. Sure, you can say it's venomous or poisonous. I'm like, whatever. I know what you mean to say, and the connotation is more important than the denotation at this point. Same for turtles and tortoises. if you call a tortoise a turtle, I really don't care. They are turtles. They're just a classification of turtle. If you call an aquatic turtle a tortoise, then I will get after you. Because that is egregious.
Then the beef starts there. Yes. You know Mariah's boundary around turtles and tortoises now.
Now you know. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I'm
awesome.
on a higher level of pretense at this point.
You really are, though. You've passed on from student to now expert teacher.
Oh, yes. The expert snob.
Yeah, hey, someone's got to be it. Someone's got to be. But we're all, wrapped up on questions from the chat. I got to go, and I know my dog's pawing at the door right now, so he's like, come let me out.
Oh, poor guy.
But yeah, but it was a pleasure, and I would love to do this again. I know there's actually a bunch of topics we were not able to hit on, like keeping reptiles outside, feeding wild insects to your reptile, and we even didn't get into enclosure size, which I know you've touched on in length at the Animal Home podcast. So if you are out there and you would like to listen to more from Mariah, I would highly suggest just going on like the Apple or Spotify podcast app and then just typing in Mariah Healey ReptiFiles. You will find a plethora of the podcasts that she's been a part of. And Mariah, for our guests, where would they be best to find you at, reach out to you, and find your resources?
Yeah, so obviously my resources are at reptifiles.com, reptifiles.com. That is where you're going to find all of the care resources, some product reviews, some articles on other topics. Then obviously I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube. Facebook just kind of mirrors Instagram to a lesser degree. Mostly I'm there to lurk in forums and occasionally chip in where I need to. I'm most active TikTok. You can message me and I'll respond. I'm trying to be better about that. But usually I'm better on Instagram. If you comment on a YouTube video, though, please do. It's good for the algorithm. All three of those platforms have the same content on them. So that's just where I put my short videos where I discuss certain commonly misunderstood subjects or intended to just be there for clarity, or if I've got a rant on something. But they're entirely educational. They are not fancy videos at all. It is me talking to the camera on a subject. You may as well just be listening, watching. I mean, if you really like watching this talk for 3 minutes straight, then be my guest. But they're not fancy. They're not built for engagement. They're just me delivering a short lecture on a very particular subject. But that's where you can find me. If you prefer email, Mariah at reptifiles.com. You can email me there with your questions, concerns, whatever. I also do reptile consulting work. So if you need help setting up a new enclosure, upgrading your enclosure, I can help you out with that. Or you just need to talk at length about figuring out your particular reptile. I do half-hour and 1 hour consulting sessions depending on what we're talking about and how many animals are involved. And so you can email me if you want to ask about that and potentially set up a consult time. And then Patreon. I'm on Patreon. It's a great way for people to support my research. Every dollar helps really with just making sure that I have the funds to keep this going. It gets more expensive all the time. And also, you do get to see a little bit behind the scenes. So I'll share things thoughts that I've been using on, pictures, videos from behind the scenes, little things that I'm experimenting with or tinkering with, previews on product reviews that I'm doing. So my initial thoughts, frustrations with certain products, just, general behind the scenes stuff. It's not a fancy Patreon at all, but if you want a slightly more personal relationship, also VIP for having your emails and messages answered guaranteed within 24 hours, that's the place to go.
Well, definitely, if you're a person that's listening to this, join Mariah's Patreon. You are going to be able to level up your husbandry and care for your reptile. And Mariah, thank you so much for contributing to the community and, of course, raising the bar and the standard in herpetoculture.
It's my
And thank
lifelong
you to
passion,
everyone.
whether people like it or not.
Yeah, no, we need more people like you in this hobby. So I thank you, Mariah. And thank you to all who's been here,
Thank you, guys.
and catch us. See you guys later.